Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast. Introducing your host for this evening first. He is the host with the most from the West Coast, the Bay Area Brawler, Skyler Greenberg. And his partner, he has colonized, energized, and revolutionized the podcasting wrestling world today. Your Colonial Champion, Sean McIntyre. Hello, I am not Elias, but instead, I am your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty. Today, of course, is my birthday. Happy birthday. This is the podcast made by Smarks, for Smarks, and I'm sure all of you are sitting there shoveling Hot Pockets into your face, your back knee exploding out of your Shorty G t-shirt, and you're chug-a-lugging that Mountain Dew, and I want to let you know that you are welcome here. But of course, I am not here alone. And do you want to know who's with me? I'm going to tell you who's with me here in just a second. He is the man of the hour, the man with the power, sweet to be sour, the Bay Area Brawler. He's the man of the hour, man with the power, Skyler Greenberg. Greenberg, oh yeah. That's right, folks. Welcome, one and all, to the Court-Martail Podcast. As if that weren't enough to tell you what was going on here today. Skyler, how you doing, buddy?
Well, first off, I enjoy Hot Pockets, so screw you one.
I also enjoy Hot Pockets.
Also, just because I gained 5 pounds doesn't mean you make fun of me back of the guy on my shirt.
I didn't specifically say you were the one who had the back knee in his shirt.
And third, I like Mountain Dew and Sprite, so you can go ahead and screw off there too.
Well, and in all fairness, John Cena is hitting a Mountain Dew commercial right now, so that is wrestling related.
Anyways,
we're having a good time here, ladies and gentlemen. It's my birthday. We're having some fun.
But no, thank you for having me, Sean. It's great to be here on your birthday and celebrate with you turning 27.
28.
And 28. Okay, 28. And I just want to say, because it is the time of the year, in the immortal words of Erwin R. Shyster, always pay your taxes.
That's right. And that's not what I want to be doing on my birthday, but sometimes that's what you got to be doing on your birthday. It's just the way it goes. But, of course, I wish I had the maniacal laugh of Ted DiBiase where I could just pay him off and then leave, but I unfortunately do not have that classic cackle. But we have many other cackling shenanigans to be had here today on this very off the rails from the start episode of the Court-Martail Podcast that I'm excited to get back on the rails. And the man who's going to do that is my co-host here, because you know what time it is, I know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of news. Hit that intro, baby. Coming straight to you from the Golden Gate Garage, this is the Wrestle News with Skyler Greenberg.
That is right, ladies and gentlemen. I, the Bay Area Brawler, Skyler Greenberg, at your service, is here to dish out the hottest, the freshest, the biggest news in the pro wrestling industry. And Sean, are you ready?
Yes.
Let's begin in the land of Stamford, Connecticut in WWE. And a new WWE champion, folks.
Yeah.
That is right.
Yeah.
Bobby Lashley. On Monday Night Raw on March 1st, he had to wait 3 hours. He had to wait for The Miz, who got stomach cramps, and who complained about a championship match. And when they actually had the match, ran away and took the title with a countout. In the main event slot, they put the guys against each other. And just to make sure The Miz could not run away, they made it a lumberjack match. and there was no offense from The Miz. Bobby Lashley dominated his crap, and he is your new WWE champion. Ladies and gentlemen, Bobby Lashley, give it up to the man.
Congratulations, Bobby. I'm so happy for him. I really am. It's long overdue, but I think happened at just the right time at the same time.
I agree. He was not ready to be the champion until this past year when he went over a renaissance of a career.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it later in the spotlight, but really the Hurt Business is what made Bobby Lashley what Bobby Lashley was, and that entire faction deserves credit for being probably the most expertly built group WWE has done since The Shield, as far as how they've presented them for the most part, and how they have really worked well as a unit and have all been treated as valuable members of the unit.
They've just gotten better as they've gotten into their groove, and you have to look at the foursome as a whole. Shelton Benjamin, the veteran, the guiding hand, MVP, the voice, Cedric Alexander with his high-flying moves and athletic ability, and Bobby Lashley with his power and speed.
What's amazing here is that Bobby is he's no spring chicken himself. He's 45, and you couldn't tell looking at him.
No, he's in the best shape of his career. Like, if you look at his run when he was ECW champion, I would argue right now he's in better shape because back then he was just bigger.
Oh yeah.
But now he's more compact, but he's even faster than he was before, and that's something that he didn't have.
Well, I think a lot of that also has to do with his time in TNA, and I think that is something that also deserves credit because Bobby got a lot better at a lot of different things when he went to TNA. And part of that, I think, was him being with MVP because they were together with the Beatdown Clan, and that's why their chemistry was so easily matched in WWE because they already had that chemistry that they would never acknowledge, of course. But in any case, it's the fact that Bobby is, I think a lot of us had kind of figured, I mean, especially me, after he was getting somewhere with Leo, but you knew that he wasn't going to get all the way there with Leo. And then as soon as he left and he started being a lackey again, it was like, God, I don't know if Bobby's ever going to get there. I had kind of given up hope on Bobby until MVP came along.
And then the low point being in that cuckold storyline with Lana and Rusev.
Oh, God. And MVP literally going up to him being like, Bobby, you're better than this. Let's get serious.
I remember when we did the Money in the Bank review last year when Bobby Lashley substituted for MVP in a match, and that was the start of their business relationship. And you and me were very skeptical at the time. Because, like, maybe they could do the TNA stuff, but we never imagined that they would be able to do what they have.
I also never imagined that WWE would allow them to do what they have. You know what I mean? It's the fact that they have been able to be pretty much this natural together. They obviously have bullet points as opposed to, MVP is not running a script. I can guarantee you that.
No, he's doing his own thing, and that's what you have to do with talent like that.
Yeah.
You have to trust that they can get themselves over, and that's... If they were scripted, there was no way they would be able to do what they do.
Yeah, and what's amazing is that there are a few guys that are allowed to do that, and most don't. And one of the guys I was always surprised was able to do that when he was wrestling was Samoa Joe. Because he's a great talker. Don't get me wrong. He's a great talker. But I was surprised that WWE allowed him to talk.
Well, I'm sure that there was a lot of trust in WWE with Samoa Joe and his experience that he could be able to get himself over.
Plus the fact that he came in with his name was another big part of that as well.
I feel like that's WWE kind of softening their stances on people who have a success outside of WWE.
Well, to some degree, and a lot less now. I mean, who was the last guy? Bobby Roode? I think Bobby Roode was probably, or Drew. Might have been Drew. Or no, Bobby debuted on Drew.
Drew was a WWE guy before. So that doesn't really count. Like, we're talking about guys who were built outside of WWE. The last one was probably either Bobby Roode or Shinsuke.
I think Shinsuke was before Bobby.
Yeah, but those were kind of the last guys, like AJ, Samoa Joe, Shinsuke and Bobby Roode. Otherwise, everyone else gets a new name and new package.
Yeah, and mostly recently, and that they've really gone into that. I mean, as far as like Robbie E. Not that Robbie E. was the greatest name, but turning him into Roger Stone, which I still don't understand why he's a manager now, because I thought he was fine wrestling, but.
Well, but he's no longer on NXT for the moment. I think they're repackaging him again. But you bring up an interesting point, and I'm glad you brought up Drew McIntyre, because
yes,
on the same Raw, Drew McIntyre cut a promo where he said, I don't care who it is, I will be in the main event of WrestleMania. And now, it looks like we're on a collision course with Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre.
Here's my thing with that. I'm fine. I'm honestly fine with that, because their match they had, what was it? April, May? No, it was May. It was after Rollins, but it was before the Money in the Bank catastrophe.
Ziggler.
Oh yeah, and Ziggler. Oi. Anyway, but that, and honestly, that was one of the best. I thought that his match with Bobby, which didn't really have much of a conclusion on purpose, I think. So,
because Lana was a distraction and cost Bobby Lashley the match. But now he's more focused and he's more dominant. So this could be something even better.
This should be really good. But here's my question to you, Sky. Because we have this situation where Bobby Lashley was very obviously the babyface on Monday Night Raw. Because Miz is just a squirrely little heel that, you know, and honestly, the Hurt Business have been babyface for a while, ever since feuding with Retribution for no reason, beating them and then leaving. And making Retribution look like yesterday's garbage. But now we've got Drew. So does that mean, is Drew going to turn, or are we going to actually push with a babyface title match at WrestleMania? To end the show, probably, because it is 2 nights.
So that's the question I was thinking, is who's going to be the babyface and who's going to be the heel? I think the way they're going to do it is I think they're going to turn Drew heel, which I'm all for this reason. He's been a babyface for about a year or so now, and he's probably gone as far as he can as a face, and it would not take much to turn him heel because he has the intensity to be a heel.
Yes. And
but the biggest thing is that you can't turn Bobby Lashley back into a heel so quickly after basically turning him face. Yeah. Even though he did attack Drew McIntyre after the Elimination Chamber, which is a heel move, and then won the championship from Miz, but became a babyface, but you're going to make him a heel again against Drew?
I mean, I wouldn't put it past WWE at this point. I mean, nobody gives a crap anymore about heels and babyfaces as far as the people booking the shows. Not enough amongst people that because they think that all wrestling fans are just idiots, so they don't, and that they don't care, so then they don't bother to put in the effort. And part of my, I've always liked the idea of turning somebody either heel or babyface while they're champion, which doesn't happen very often. And I always liked toying with that idea of like either winning the title as a heel and then fighting an equal heel of significance where you could actually take the heat off that other person and slowly turn that guy babyface and then turn the Warrior champion into a babyface champion and then keep him as champion. I like that idea, but it's only been a couple weeks since Bobby was heel.
I think it makes more sense to have Drew McIntyre as a heel for this reason. Drew has been WWE champion for 300 days since last year's WrestleMania, over his 2 reigns. So he's had his time with the championship. People are not going to be as sympathetic for him as they are for Bobby Lashley.
Well, it's interesting because you're right. I think you're right because definitely were there fans in the crowds this year, I think you would 100% be correct in reflecting that in what you just said. I think you'd be 100% correct, and that'd be the way that the fans would react this whole year to how Drew's been booked. Which makes this interesting because then you're also putting this as to what's the angle. What's the angle for Drew to turn? Is it the fact that Bobby won the belt? It can't be. So in order to do that, I think that you have to deny Drew either wins or deny Drew the opportunity at Mania. Repeatedly.
I think what is going to happen is that they're going to do the WrestleMania match, and Bobby Lashley is going to win, and Drew McIntyre is going to attack Bobby Lashley afterwards, and then that's going to kickstart their feud.
Especially if they're going to be doing, and of course this is now going to be in front of fans, which is going to be the other interesting part of this. How are fans going to react to this?
I think they're definitely going to be hyped for the match, but the interesting thing is going to be seeing who they cheer for and who they don't cheer for.
Well, and that's the thing, is I'd imagine that this would have to be the close of the show. Dear God, it's this is the WWE Championship, so who knows? It could go on at any time. At any point in these 2 days, this WWE Championship could show up, except the main event.
Well, it's going to be the main event of at least one of the 2 nights. I suspect it's going to be the main event of night 1.
I would hope so. But if you recall, we did see it main event WrestleMania last year, so I guess I can't complain too much. Because we had Braun Strowman and Goldberg and the Boneyard match for night 1 last year. So hopefully they'll just stick to wrestling matches this time. And no more Goldberg matches, please.
Well, that's another thing, too, is that Bobby Lashley has hinted that he still wants a match with Brock Lesnar. And you know Brock Lesnar matches, they're not going to be long.
And I honestly I've been dying to see Bobby and Brock in the ring. And here's an interesting thought. If, in a weird world that they actually keep Drew and Bobby babyface, could you have Brock pop in at the end to get the heat, or would he end up being a bigger babyface than either of them?
You could make Brock Lesnar unlikable because people will boo Brock Lesnar naturally because they don't want to see him win the title again.
Yeah. I think that Paul Heyman's going to stab Roman Reigns in the back and go back to Brock when Brock shows up. But that's...
Yeah, I feel like that's a definite possibility.
Yeah.
But this also means one more thing. We're not required to watch Fastlane if we don't feel like it, because Bobby Lashley winning the title is not going to happen. He already won the title.
Yeah, we might just skip it. We'll see how the card lines up and see how much misery we want to put ourselves through. But we'll take, for a show called Fastlane, we'll take the low route. We'll slow things down. We'll slow things down a little bit. We'll go to Roadblock instead. We'll watch Triple H versus John Moxley. I'm sorry, Dean Ambrose.
And speaking of AEW, great segue, John.
Can't make those up. Happens naturally.
We're going to go to AEW. Now, we've been kind of stuck with incidents that have happened recently, so we haven't had the chance to talk about this. And that is the fact that AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling are working together. And they did this by having KENTA show up, attack John Moxley, give the worst GTS ever and John Moxley's worst sell ever of the GTS. And then they had a match with Kenny Omega and some guy, whose name I can't remember. It was, I can't remember. Oh yeah, Pac. It was Pac.
Oh.
It was a tag match.
Oh, how could you forget? How could you forget Neville? Come on, man.
Because they haven't made anything memorable with
No,
Pac.
you're right. You're right. Even the people who are good on that show are so nondescript just by the nature of the booking.
Yes, but all of this led to an IWPG United States Championship match, which John Moxley is the owner of that title, and he beat KENTA, so he retains that championship. But this is all part of Tony Khan's grand plan that kicked the Forbidden Door down.
Great.
Now, Sean, let me ask you a question. Does any of what I just said make you enthusiastic about an AEW New Japan alliance?
Well, okay. Before I get talking about New Japan and AEW, I want to put a little big picture perspective in this. New Japan's business is not doing well. No one's is doing well considering what we've been through with the pandemic, obviously. But New Japan in particular has really not been doing well. And right now, I'm more of the belief that New Japan probably needs AEW and Tony Khan's money a little bit more than AEW needs New Japan's talent. Especially because Tony Khan does not give a crap about attracting a new audience at all. It's been proven. And for the cheapness of the deal that they've gotten with TNT, it doesn't matter because they're still somehow profitable. So this is just a playground for a bunch of malarkey. And they're going to try, with Tony Khan's totally backwards booking, bring New Japan down with the ship that is somehow going to take on water and still remain afloat. So no, Skylar, I'm not excited whatsoever about this alliance because I don't think that it's going to help business in any sort for either of these companies because not enough people in America care about Japanese wrestling except for the people who are already watching AEW to begin with.
Agreed. Like, what's the point of doing a 16-woman tournament for a number one contendership for the AEW Championship and having half of the bracket in Japan with wrestlers we never heard of? Like, there's a couple of good women's wrestlers who are part of that 8-woman side in the Japanese bracket. But honestly, like...
And the American half of the bracket has 3 more Japanese wrestlers in it.
Well, yeah, I know. That's the other thing, too.
It's like, what are we even working with here?
And not to mention the fact that they put the matches either on Bleacher Report or YouTube, not even on the main show, except for a couple.
Yeah, and so I'm just not interested.
How are you going to build up a women's division if you don't give them the biggest audience to work with? Like, honestly, you could cut out an MJF Chris Jericho segment to put a women's match on. That'd be fine.
They just don't care.
You would rather put on Shaq and Jade Cargill versus Cody Rhodes and Red Velvet over the finals of that tournament, by the way.
You can't forget that the original scheduling for that match, as Cody basically just said in a promo, was, hey, well, we wanted to do this, but Brandy got pregnant, so I guess I got to team up with this person instead. And they just outwardly said that, and that was the build to this match that is taking place, or has already taken place.
Which Jade Cargill won by pinning Red Velvet.
Terrific. Outstanding.
But no. You want to hear the dumbness of this?
As if it weren't already.
So Cody Rhodes does a bump with Shaq where he goes off the ropes, does a crossbody, and Shaq, who was standing on the ring apron, catches Cody. They both fall and land on 2 tables, right?
Yep.
Shaq gets put on a stretcher and put into an ambulance, and they close the door. And Tony Schiavone goes to the ambulance door because he wants to talk to Shaq before he goes to the hospital. He opens the ambulance door, and Shaq is gone.
What? Why?
Which means that Shaq has gained the powers of the Undertaker, or Matt Hardy, or Kane, and teleported.
You know what really happened? Last time we saw an ambulance. When was the last time we saw an ambulance? Was that Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was later on. Because guess who was in that ambulance that had an oozing red light in the back of it? We have not seen Bray Wyatt in some time, so Shaq needs to come out in the Bray Wyatt Fiend mask out on Dynamite next week and say, "Let me in." Oh, it'd be the best. It'd be the best. Oh my God. Please put Shaq in the Firefly Funhouse.
No, we're not going
yes. to. Make this happen. No. Well, hey, remember, Kenny Omega apparently believes that Triple H would be open to a crossover of talent between AEW and WWE. So this could happen.
Oh, yeah, he gave that interview, and so did Cody, about wanting to work with WWE one day.
Oh, man. So...
Professional wrestling, ladies and gentlemen, in 2021.
2021.
Wrestling 2021.
What a time to be alive.
And the worst part is that the Wrestling Observer News gave out their awards for 2020, and AEW cleaned up. Moxley, Wrestler of the Year. Announcer of the Year. Excalibur?
Yeah.
Tony Khan, Booker of the Year. Who votes on this shit?
Fans of The Observer, who all also happen to be fans of AEW. And it's funny you say that, Sky. It's almost like you knew what we were going to talk about today, because we are going to move on to our next topic, and that topic is Dave Meltzer. A little bit of context here for all of the people at home and the millions in attendance. A year ago, about year and change, on the second episode in the reboot, the first of this format, my very first topic, general topic of the week, was Dave Meltzer. And in that 12 minutes or so, my overall point was that as much as Dave Meltzer was a contributor to the journalistic portion of his time in the wrestling journalism world for so long, and all the historical articles and the interviews and the things that he really was able to do for that, I respected, but I did not like his place of power in professional wrestling, considering how many of the boys ride his jock and accept his word as the word. Even though I respected him for what he was, even though his opinions are what they are, and that the SAR system was overall damaging, because it was now taking a critic's analysis who had never been in the ring as more credence than the people who actually had done it before. That was last time. I wanted to talk about this again, A, because Skylar can join me on my thoughts on Dave Meltzer, because it has gotten so much worse in just a year's time with AEW now in the fold, and Dave Meltzer apparently being some sort of PR representative for them. That he has to be linked. I can't imagine he's not. Especially with the kind of people involved and the kind of talent and the way he's been writing about that show. He has gotten to the point where his ego is probably larger than anyone's in the wrestling business today.
Because he sees himself as a hero. Did you hear what some of his latest tweets were about?
I mean, I know the one where he said in the last 28 years, every Booker of the Year, one Booker of the Year because they took my teachings, which is next level arrogance for someone who's never been in the ring before.
Dave Meltzer, in the words of The Rock, know your role and shut your mouth.
Yeah.
You are a wrestling journalist and a historian. I would argue the best wrestling journalist and historian in the history of professional wrestling, because your knowledge of wrestling is second to none. And the Wrestling Observer newsletter was the best publication for professional wrestling for, I want to say, the last 25 years. Let's go 25 years.
More or less.
Because around like 2015, 2016, 2017, Dave started changing. I believe, this is a personal opinion, that Dave Meltzer secretly always wanted to be recognized for how great he was.
Oh, no doubt.
And he never got that recognition from WWE. He wanted Vince McMahon to acknowledge him, but we all know Vince never acknowledges anyone outside of WWE's sphere.
No.
But he started getting recognition from Kenny Omega and the Bucks. I mean, the Bucks named a move after him. And Cody Rhodes and all the other independent wrestlers who treated Dave like God. And Dave Meltzer bought into it and built his God complex. And now he is a shill for AEW.
It's out of control.
Like, do you believe for 1 second that even with the downturn year of 2020, that Tony Khan is Booker of the Year?
No. No, if you've watched that show, all that you and I watched, Sky, is what, 4 pay-per-views? Not even 3 pay-per-views of AEW Revolution, which is the equivalent of what, like 12 hours? So
here's the thing. I was dared to watch weekly AEW television by a couple of mutual friends of ours who are AEW fans, and I agreed to do it. And I had to stop.
Yeah.
Because after 2 months, I couldn't do it anymore. Not with the bullshit I keep seeing. And they all keep saying, oh, it's great, it's fun, it's silly, I can forget about it and have a laugh. Motherfuckers, that's not what professional wrestling is.
No, well, but that's what sports entertainment is. And that's always...
I would not even call AEW sports entertainment because they have forgotten the sport element and they're not entertaining. They are garbage indie wrestling and they should be ashamed of themselves, but they don't care because they're doing this for fun and making money. And Dave Meltzer, you should take whatever opinions you have and shove up your ass.
Well, wow. That's I mean, I'm not full-fledged disagreeing with you, because Dave has gotten so far out of control that he truly thinks that he is the wrestling business. And I said it from the start, to have somebody convince the boys that he knows what he's talking about. Dave Meltzer, and I said this on that podcast, never has and never will step foot in a wrestling ring. Dave Meltzer never has and never will wrestle a match, especially now. I mean, he's in his early 60s or late 50s. I don't know. He's got enough wrinkles to be either. Dave Meltzer never has, and Dave Meltzer never will know the mechanics of a pro wrestling match. And in all fairness, if you're looking at it from that perspective, neither will you or I. Podcast made by Smarks for Smarks. We're looking on the outside. And as somebody who regards him as somewhat of the like mega smark, the boss smark, the final boss smark you see at the end of the game, where we're just all like a bunch of the small smarks you meet along the way who like give you some items sometimes, or like maybe you have to duel one of us, and if you succeed, like then we give you a key item to continue your quest. That's what we are. Dave Meltzer's the guy who just hacks and slashes and gives you star ratings at the end of it. That, as somebody who is in that position, he is now where he used to be so much more objective in the way that he would present. I mean, he'd always have his opinions because his whole thing was criticism, but with the way that his knowledge base was, you could still accept it and understand it because he was still following along for a set of fans who at the time, especially when it got started in the 80s, were relatively small. The smart fans were so small that the Observer was so ahead of its time, and that's why Dave Meltzer was so well regarded. But I think part of it is that because the fans have become predominantly smarks, Dave Meltzer feels now that he is the king of the smarks, and that he now has the obligation at will. And the worst thing that's become of that is that now the boys are accepting that. Once star ratings started to matter to the boys, that was the end of it.
It's just the thing, though, is that Dave Meltzer has never been a wrestler. He's never been a manager. He's never been a writer. He's never been a booker. He's only ever been a journalist and a critiquer. And that's fine. Like, there are movie critics out there, like what's his name?
Roger Ebert. I made this comparison, actually.
Roger Ebert, yes. And Roger Ebert is noted as being one of the best film critics ever. But he will tell you that he will never tell an actor how he should act or tell an actress how she should act, because he was never an actor or actress. But he will critique their skills nonetheless. But he acknowledges that his opinion, and that you can listen to it, but make your own judgments based on what I have to say.
Yes.
Because my opinion may be different from yours, because your experience may be different from mine.
Right.
And Dave Meltzer, he used to be objective.
Yeah.
He used to say, this is only my opinion. And you can listen to it, but make up your own mind when you're watching the show.
Yeah.
Now, he is the god of wrestling smarts. And his voice is law.
Yeah.
And he will cast upon thee all of his judgments, and thou shalt listen to his judgment.
Yeah, and honestly, not all of it is his fault. I will say not all of it is his fault, because if he was not encouraged, as you said, because to use your analogy with Roger Ebert, it's one thing for Roger Ebert to critique, but it's quite another for Brad Pitt to go to Roger Ebert and say, hey, in this scene I'm doing, how should I act? What should I do here? How is Roger Ebert going to be able to tell you accurately how to act when he is never acted before, has never done anything related to acting as far as I know, because most of his gimmick was, I believe, just the critiquing the movies. But actors are not going to him to determine how to act. So why are the boys looking for Dave Meltzer's star ratings to say how they should wrestle their matches? And that is a big reason why we've got the Spot Fest pandemic that we have in the business today, is that notion itself. And I think Dave Meltzer, maybe not directly, but he is partially responsible for this and the state of pro wrestling today.
Definitely he is, because if you listen to him and what he says, he feels that he is so important when he's just a bit player in professional wrestling. He's an important bit player, but he's just a bit player.
Well,
He's never been involved with a major wrestling company. He's never been involved in a situation where he got the opportunity to influence people, and that ate away at him.
Well,
because he wanted to be influential.
I actually am going to disagree with that, because that was one of the things I do give Dave Meltzer credit for. Because one of the things that Dave has always been able to do in certain situations was get different people to see others in a better light, based on especially the prestige that people regarded the Observer Awards back when in the 80s and 90s, when he was actually taking it seriously. You know, there were people who did get more support from those kinds of awards, and this guy did really well, as well as like the magazines and things like that. Every little bit counts. I'm not taking that away. Honestly, I was thinking about this earlier. One of the things, before we got to see Kenny Omega in the States, one of the first times that I ever took Dave Meltzer's anything seriously, because his journalism was always iffy because of how vaguely he words things, this match, when he gave out the first 6-star match with Omega and Okada, that was enough to make me go and watch the match. And it was a good match. It wasn't a great match, but it was a good match. Long, but it was a good match. But I did end up liking Kenny Omega and Okada out of the deal. And also because New Japan at the time actually knew how to keep Omega reined in. But I think that in a lot of ways, Meltzer did help get Omega over to a United States audience that would not have cared otherwise.
Right. And if you think about it, Dave Meltzer is responsible for Kenny Omega. Because no one was talking about Kenny Omega until he had that 6-star match. And maybe if he didn't report on it, he would still be a big star, but just in Japan. And would never come over to the United States. But now, look where he is.
Well, and that's because AEW doesn't know how to handle anybody. And that's the truth. I hardly, as bad as the talent encourages the garbage that happens in AEW, I hardly blame the talent most of the time, even though some of them shouldn't be on the show. And because a lot of them come up with their own stuff, but a lot of it is just because Tony Khan does not know what the hell he is doing. Nobody can get over on this show. They can't. And Dave Meltzer doesn't help by blindly just going in on AEW and the Observer. I mean, I'm not one, I don't really read the Observer. I've only ever once. But considering the soft stance that's most of the time taken on AEW, but more damning than that is Meltzer's just attacking of people who criticize AEW at all.
Just think about this for a second.
It's childish.
No, but just think about this for a second. On the March 3rd edition of AEW, we had the Cody and Shaq match, which I just talked about. Comrade Thompson just showed up, and now Tully Blanchard is wrestling. And you know that Dave Meltzer's going to defend that. He's going to defend guys like Sting and Tully wrestling, despite the fact that they shouldn't.
But he wouldn't if they were wrestling for WWE, I bet.
Yes, exactly, because he will, on his dying death, Dave Meltzer will hate WWE for never recognizing him.
Well, and this is what really makes me suspect that he's got to be, if he's not getting paid, he's definitely being there is some sort of dual representationship, some sort of working relationship between Dave Meltzer and this company, because there's no other way to justify it. There's no other way to explain it. The over defense, I mean, he honestly, every time that somebody critiques AEW, he comes out like a kid who just tripped on the playground and blames the other kid who was standing at the swing set. It's like it.
Or he tries to minimize it, so it's like, oh, they're just trying a new thing. Don't worry, it will be done much better. Or, oh, Tony Khan's only been booking for 1 year, but as he gets more experience, he'll get better as a booker.
Well, and the other thing that bothers me too, it's like, you and I both listen to, and it is no secret that we are both Cornette listeners. And one of the interesting things about the Observer is one of Dave's write-ups that bothered me about the awards was when he talked about Jim Ross and Jim Ross's role in AEW as Excalibur won the award, and Jim Ross was like 3rd. Yeah, the top 3 were Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, or Kevin Kelly, Tony Schiavone, and Jim Ross were the top 4. And this is what he said about Jim Ross. That Jim Ross was there not to do commentary, but to basically there as a position so the mainstream can recognize. Dave, there is no mainstream anymore. No one's tuning into wrestling for the first time anymore and saying that, I want to be a part of that. That's not happening. Mainstream does not happen. So the fact that you gave it to Excalibur, who called out a bunch of moves, which he said incorrectly, and wears a diaper on his head, and just...
And provides some unnecessary long backstory for people that we don't give a shit about.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've got the Joshi Women's Ultimate Princess, Tiara, Bowser, Mario, Luigi, Mario Party, roll a 6-sided die, you've activated my trap card champion. And
I'm going to be honest with you, I can't wait to see what the hell Excalibur does when he tries to explain why Paul White is in AEW.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bad. And folks, this is I guess a good time to mention that yes, we are gonna watch Revolution. That's gonna be next week, so this is timely. So we get to see the exploding death wire, barbed wire, cheese grater, massive paper shredder, assault rifles, batteries, car batteries, testicular torture, ambulances, crutches, water wingies, Legos, thumbtacks, broken glass, cheeseburgers, cheeseburger patties, and all of that death match between Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley.
Is it wrong as a masochist that I'm asking or praying for a double suicide murder?
I would prefer they live, preferably, but I would prefer the match just be quick. Just make it quick. Don't drag me through 40 minutes.
They're doing a barbed wire death match. That implies that someone's going to die.
There's going to be light tubes. It's going to be lots of light tubes. Just be aware.
Here's the thing. When I said that Eddie Kingston versus Jon Moxley was CZW, and you said, no, that's not CZW, I was mistaken. This is CZW.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be. And this is why I just don't understand why Moxley would want to go back to this. I mean, I know stuff sucks at WWE, but why this? You're not Mick Foley. I'm sorry. And this is not the place for this kind of match. I'm not sorry about.
Right. But Sean, let's get this taste out of our mouths before we have to watch Revolution.
Yeah, well,
let's get a
final thoughts on Dave Meltzer, because this is the thing. Because Dave Meltzer's gonna suck the jock off that match, I guarantee it. Because he's gonna be like, at least it was safe and blah blah blah, which it may or may not be. Who knows?
And it was Kenny Omega's artistic rendition.
Yes, of course. So it's going to be like probably 4 stars at least. Which the bottom line is that Dave is now so power hungry and he's misusing this that Dave either needs to take a vacation or the Observer's going to lose a lot of credibility if it hasn't already.
I think it's lost all credibility it had to begin with.
Well, I think it's only going to get worse, and I think that the more that the boys encourage it, the worse it's going to get. And Dave, I want to like you, man, but you're messing up my wrestling. but somebody who does not do that is Drew McIntyre, and I heard Drew McIntyre, which tells me it's time for the...
What time is it? It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, they down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the babyface cheer, then the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week.
That's right, folks. It is time for our match of the week, and I am so excited to hear what you have to say about this match, Sky, because you have several thoughts you have said to me prior to our recording here on this date and time of this match. Elimination Chamber 2010, Drew McIntyre versus Kane for the Intercontinental Championship. Why don't you go first, sir?
So, Sean, I don't think I've ever revealed this to you, but I'm going to reveal a slightly controversial opinion.
Okay.
Elimination Chamber 2010 is one of my favorite pay-per-views.
Okay. I've not seen the entirety of it, to be honest with you.
Especially the two chamber matches, the World Heavyweight Championship chamber match that The Undertaker lost the World Heavyweight Championship to because Shawn Michaels super kicked him.
Yep.
Shawn Michaels super kicked him and Chris Jericho won, and that led to the WrestleMania 26, 25?
26.
The retire. Yeah, the career versus streak match.
And then the Batista run-in.
That build. Yeah, and then there was the Batista run-in where John Cena won the WWE Championship in that Elimination Chamber, and Batista attacked John Cena afterward and took the WWE title. Now, I had forgotten, I haven't seen this match in a couple of years, but Kane versus Drew McIntyre was an underrated match. It just had the difficult situation of following Batista taking the WWE title from John Cena.
Yeah, and
the crowd was dead.
Yeah, and it was, but they, in their defense, and in Kane's defense, because Kane was hauling ass in this match. He was working his ass off to make Drew look good and to have Drew take an absolute beating. I mean, God bless. Kane was killing it in this one. And by the end of the match, got the people back into it.
Yes, he did. Now, before we begin, let's provide a bit of a context for Drew McIntyre.
Sure.
So Drew McIntyre had been wrestling for 10 years, starting from age 15.
Yep.
And he signed with WWE in 2007, made a couple of appearances, then went to FCW and trained for a year in FCW. Then, in August of 2009, he makes his debut, has a short filler feud with R-Truth and beats R-Truth in 5 minutes at one of the pay-per-views in October. I think it was Hell in a Cell. I don't remember 2009 pay-per-view schedule. Anyways.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And then at Survivor Series, he was part of the Miz's Survivor Series team and survived along with Sheamus and the Miz. And that helped jumpstart him because in that Survivor Series match, he beat John Morrison, who at the time was the Intercontinental Champion.
Right.
And then in December of 2009, at the TLC pay-per-view, Drew McIntyre defeated John Morrison.
Yeah, we've had enough of John Moxley.
Sorry. Drew McIntyre defeated John Morrison for the Intercontinental Championship with an eye poke. Keep that in mind, folks.
Yep.
And then we come into this match. Drew McIntyre is 25 years old. He's very young. And I thought of this comparison as I was watching this match. Drew McIntyre, at this point, at 25 years old in 2010, reminded me of a young Randy Orton. He has that beautiful look. And
interesting.
He's very natural in the ring, and he definitely is a hot prospect. He wasn't nearly as developed as Randy Orton was, but who was as developed as Randy
Orton was a prodigy.
When he debuted. But Drew McIntyre has a lot of the same characteristics that Randy Orton had. But Drew, you could definitely tell, was green, and he needed to work with someone like Kane.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because I spotted how green Drew was. And I mean, and that's no knock. It's just it was early in his career. He was 25 years old. And that's a really fascinating comparison. I really like that comparison between Orton and Drew, especially because you can't really make a comparison to anyone else in that early OVW crowd that got brought in early because Batista didn't really have the long longevity, I guess, because he was on and off with injuries for most of his time. Cena, he was too much of a staple. He was an anomaly in and of himself. There really was, as much as John Cena needed refining in 2002, he caught his stride pretty early, where Drew took a while.
Definitely, but
same with Orton. Honestly, Orton was the case too. But I think Orton is a good as far as the working style as well.
Yes, because the way Drew worked this match, he was very technical and grappling. There was a lot of grappling in this match.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about something that you and me probably both loved in this match, and something that modern WWE doesn't do. And that is let their commentary team talk without any manufactured words for them, any manufactured script. They just let Michael Cole, Jerry the King Lawler, and Matt Striker, who was doing yeoman's, commentate the match.
Matt Striker. Here's the interesting thing, and at some point I want to further examine Matt Striker, but here's the thing that's interesting to me. Matt Striker here was, again, the other guy who was working his ass off. This was the Kane and Striker show, because Matt Striker was working his ass off to get these two guys over, and when he's got that kind of direction, he's great. But when he goes off the rails and starts breaking kayfabe left and right to get things over, that's where the line is crossed. You know, it's like, but when Striker's doing this, and when he was in this, he was A grade and made Cole and King, who was not doing great on commentary at the time, Striker made them both passable in this situation.
Like, I would argue that next to Todd Grisham, who unfortunately didn't do pay-per-views, Matt Striker was the best commentator in WWE at this time. But I will say this, too. Michael Cole and Jerry the King Lawler, I know we give them a bad rap because they well deserved it. But here, both of them sounded much more natural, and they both didn't feel forced.
Yeah.
They gave out their lines, and there was definitely camaraderie between the three guys. And that helps tremendously when you're calling a match because they were painting the story very well. And I like the thing that they don't do nowadays, and that is that they made this match feel like it was sports and not just entertainment.
Yeah.
Because the way they were talking about the holds, about how Matt Striker was talking about Kane and how he was doing grappling holds, and Jerry the King Lawler talking about his weight advantage, and then Michael Cole talking about Drew McIntyre's speed advantage. Those are the little things that I appreciated.
And for what it's worth, I've got to go back to Kane, because when was the last really technically sound, just like headlocks and grappling match that you've seen Kane do? Because that's not really Kane's MO, and that's how I knew that this match really was more training than it was actually big high stakes. You know, that Kane was really working Drew to really teach Drew.
But this match didn't need to be a high-stakes match because this was the cool-down match after the Elimination Chamber.
Yeah.
And this was back when WWE could structure cards. They put this match after on purpose to help the crowd rest up, but then also to get them in a solid foundation for a place where they could pop the finish.
Well, and that was really cool, too, that they were able to work that in. And, you know, the way that Kane was able to get, and Kane pretty much dominated this whole thing. Drew did not get much offense in at all.
Now, that's the thing, though, is that you say that, but Drew McIntyre did get a decent amount of offense in working on Kane's left arm and left leg. I think...
But not where the high spots were. Where most of the big crescendo moments, Drew was in most of his offense was kind of in flux, but most of the high moments came with Kane, which is why it was more of why I was able to accept the finish better as a result, because I liked the different story that it told.
Right, because Drew McIntyre may have gotten more offense in, but Kane's was more impactful. Whether it was his uppercuts, his basement dropkick, which I agree. When's the last time Kane did a basement dropkick?
That was awesome. I popped. I was like, oh man, that was sick.
And this is not Slim Kane. This is 330-pound Kane.
This is
coming at you with a basement dropkick.
He was doing a whole he was bouncing all over the place. Kane was putting in work to make this match good, and not to take anything away from Drew. He was just green. I mean, you could see it in his punches. He was doing overhand punches instead of those really good gut punches he has, where he hits him like really straight in the gut and just really nails him. And you can see it's nice and tight and sting. And these were just sloppy, just overhand stuff. And
for a guy who's a heel in this match, he wasn't really working the crowd.
No, and he didn't really do anything heelish because it was... But that was okay because I understood what the purpose of this match was, which was Kane is obviously the veteran. Drew McIntyre is now called the Chosen One, but he's winning by the skin of his teeth. And so this was Drew McIntyre, even though that he's Cole, the Chosen One, is out of his league against a guy like Kane, so he eventually has to resort to cheating in order to win and retain his belt. That kind of simple
and the way this match
storytelling
ends is that Drew McIntyre
works.
tries to win the race from Kane. He rolls out of the ring. Kane throws him back in, and Drew goes to the ropes. And as Kane tries to attack him, the referee gets in the way, and Drew McIntyre with the eye poke and then future shock DDT.
And that's your lot. And it was great. And I mean, it was for what it was, and what they were trying to do, and recognizing that this was to help Drew along the way. And of course, Drew had a ways to go. But for the purposes of this match and the fact that it did get a pop at the end, this match deserves more recognition.
I would look at this match as one of the building blocks for Drew McIntyre.
A pivotal one.
For Drew, he's 25. He's very, very shiny as a prospect, but he hadn't hit his stride yet.
Yeah.
And this match did not need to be excellent, great, one of the classics of all time. It just needed to be a good mid-card title match, which it was.
And it's so funny because now, like, this match compared to what we get in modern wrestling, if we got this match 6 times on a wrestling show, that would be better than any wrestling show we get currently. That's how I feel about it, because it served its purpose. Everybody knew what they were supposed to do. You know, even though Drew was still being led through this considerably, but still took some good bumps, including that one with the arm drag to the outside.
Oh, that was a nasty one.
Which was a nasty flat back and reminded me a little bit of Mick Foley. But for what this match was, I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was a nice little homage to an era that seems to have gone by the wayside.
They just don't make them like they used to.
No, they don't. We don't have enough valuable players in our pro wrestling anymore, not the way we used to. But that leads us into our superstar spotlight for this week. And this ties into the news segment. And this is the man they call Montel Vontavious Porter, MVP. First of all, I am so sorry. Last week, I swear to you, every one of you listening, I swear to you, I was talking about music. I'm not apologizing, but I'm telling you, I was talking about music. It was an unintended joke. I did not mean to do you dirty, MVP. And I'm saying this as the outset because I want to look at this man's career, because even though he doesn't have any world titles of note to his name in the States, because he does in New Japan, I believe.
Yes, he does.
Without having any in the States, this man has quite a storied career and truly an inspirational story to boot for a guy who is now the key component of the reason Bobby Lashley is WWE champion.
And MVP has had a very interesting career that is very unusual from most people. Like,
Yeah.
MVP's career, he came in at a time when wrestling was still hot, but it was starting to cool off. But he was able to make his mark at a time when it was very hard for guys to make a mark.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So let's go back. So we do have to mention his early life if we're going to be fully comprehensive of his career.
Yes.
So MVP was originally arrested early in his life, and he was arrested and given an 18-and-a-year-and-a-half prison sentence for armed robbery and kidnapping, and then he eventually was able to get out. And part of what helped him turn his life around is the fact that one of the correctional officers in his jail/prison used to be an independent wrestler and taught MVP how to wrestle. And MVP, with a very limited background of working due to his criminal lifestyle, decided to take pro wrestling and make it his lifestyle.
And
so MVP
what a choice it was.
For a few years. Yep. So MVP wrestles for a few years, gets a contract with WWE, goes to Deep South Wrestling for a year, which I forgot existed.
Yeah, me too.
And then he debuts on August 4th, 2006, and described as a coveted free agent, MVP, stylish, ballin', a player. And when MVP was around, you knew it because of the diamond rings, the glass suits, and the nice champagne bottles. Boy, MVP was the definition of style. And I will admit this right now, I wanted to be MVP because he was damn cool.
And the giant inflatable walk-in.
Oh, I still maintain that MVP is one of the best entrances ever in WWE.
You can't forget the inflatable walk-in, and one of the last guys to really have a well-set pyro.
Yep,
And
well-timed pyro to his entrance music, which was ballin'.
Yes, also I still listen to that music, and kind of tie in with that, MVP he has laid down some pretty sick rhymes. There's a song with West Side Gun that he just did a remix on that I'm going to find the name of here in a second. So continue talking a little bit about MVP's time as it started in 2007, 2006, going into the feud with Matt Hardy.
So MVP, he works at a very different style than most wrestlers, and he also has very different attire, which got him mocked by JBL, which is funny. But,
wow, and water is wet. Somebody got bullied by JBL. Huh.
and think about this. His first feud was with Kane and The Undertaker and teaming with Mr. Kennedy against the Brothers of Destruction.
Huh.
That was his first feud. Talk about being thrown to the
It's pretty high profile. That's pretty high profile for somebody who people didn't know. But that shows how much faith they had in the man.
Yep. And then after a feud with Kane and MVP, MVP moved on to feud with Chris Benoit.
After being set on fire, mind you.
After being set on fire in an Inferno match at Armageddon. And MVP feuded with Chris Benoit. He had a couple of matches that he failed to win the United States Championship against, including WrestleMania 23. But he finally won a 2 out of 3 falls match, taking 2 straight pins at Judgment Day and becoming the United States Champion.
There you go.
And then he was able to beat Chris Benoit. And it was during this time that MVP credited Chris Benoit for making him the wrestler that he is, which it's unfortunate given that this was one of Chris Benoit's last high-profile feuds, but a good one for him to go out on.
Yeah, it's I hate that we even have to have that gravitas when talking about anything that Chris was involved in. I hate the fact that it needs to even happen because MVP, especially because they worked very well together, I thought. I mean, because Chris was so naturally talented as a worker. Not to take anything away from MVP.
But that's the thing is that his time with Chris Benoit is what made MVP the wrestler that he was. And then he begins probably his most memorable feud with Matt Hardy that went on for over a year, saw them win the tag team championships and have MVP as double champion, beating Deuce and Domino. And then they work together as a team until they finally lose the championships. MVP attacks Matt Hardy. Hardy gets written off. MVP goes on to be United States champion and have several great matches. And then in 2008, Matt Hardy returns and wins his only singles championship in WWE by beating MVP for the United States title, which is a crying shame in my eyes.
Yeah, agreed.
At least until Matt Hardy became broken.
Right. Oh, Matt Hardy.
But anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then MVP in 2009 regains the United States Championship. And there was a time where MVP flirted with the main event. He was in several Battle Royals or Royal Rumble matches. And he even was involved in some tournaments to crown the number 1 contender for the WWE Championship. I remember he had a match on Raw with Triple H in a number 1 contendership. And that was good. MVP had a good fight against Triple H, which if we ever could, I want to make that a match of the week.
MVP and Triple H?
Yeah, they had a match on Raw. It was part of a number 1 contendership for the WWE Championship, and that match was good, and I would want to look for that.
If we can find it on YouTube, we'll pop it in for next week. I would love to watch MVP Match of the Week. Absolutely.
Of course, we have to know that it's Triple H, so we're going to see the Triple H bump.
Of course. Oh, I can't wait. Nothing. Those steel steps don't even know what's about to hit them.
Exactly.
By the way,
2009,
before you continue, the name of the song is The Hurt Business, featuring MVP, and that is by West Side Gun. Check it out. At the very end, he's the last verse in it. Worth listening to.
Which, by the way, is a foreshadow of what happens in 2020 and 2021.
That's right.
So MVP gets the United States Championship back, but then after that, he loses it to Kofi Kingston, and then he kind of starts drifting because he just doesn't do well, and he leaves WWE in 2011. He goes to Japan for New Japan Pro Wrestling and is the first ever IWPG Intercontinental Champion. And that's historic because the IC title was important to New Japan because it was basically their second title.
Yep.
And then he went on to have several great matches and try to fight for the IWPG Heavyweight Championship, like wrestling against guys like Carl Anderson, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Minoru Suzuki, and he just never got the championship, but he had several chances. And he is definitely one of the guys who had lots of success, including wrestling in the G1 Climax and making it pretty far in the G1.
Which, for the people who are more into New Japan than I am, which I'm not saying that the wrestling isn't great, but especially at that time when there was a lot of really good talent on that show, it really was significant to make it far in the G1 Climax for how revered it was at the time.
Which I still think it is revered. It's just not as regarded. But that's more of an issue because of COVID than anything else. Because 2020 version was kind of rough. Anyways, then 2013 to 2019, he kind of drifts around. He does TNA for a couple of stints. He does MLW. He does Ring of Honor. It just, I feel like his stuff in TNA was good, but it never was his full potential.
Well, I think it's not like he wasn't given the ball to run with. And it's not like he didn't do a good job with it. I think the overlying problem was that the booking was so goddamn awful at this time that it was very Russo-esque. And at this time, if you're looking at 2013 into 2014, which is when this was going on, at this time, you've got Hulk Hogan still getting paid $35 grand an appearance. So it's as 2014 and 20, it was good, especially because they were working with Bobby Lashley, but the damage had been done to TNA. And they were going through different owners. And they were going through different problems with all sorts of... They were a mess. They were just an absolute mess. And I take that back. MVP was 2016. That was after Hulk Hogan.
But, no, MVP was in TNA from 2014 to 2015.
Okay, that was still after Hulk Hogan, because Hogan left in 2013.
But Russo was still in charge, and the poison was still in.
The point remains that TNA, it wasn't MVP's fault that it's not memorable. It's TNA's fault that they became unmemorable. Agreed.
Although, I will say this. The biggest thing that happened in TNA for MVP was helping Bobby Lashley win the Impact World Championship. And it's notable because one of the matches Bobby Lashley had was against Drew McIntyre.
Which we've reviewed on this show. It was one of our matches of the week back yonder, or at least one of the ones on Impact was.
And it was a really good match, but that was 5 years ago, and you can argue that both of those guys have gotten better.
Oh,
so
without a doubt.
Their WrestleMania 37 match will be better.
It should be really good. If the booking does not ruin it, it should be really good. But this overall, and then MVP from 2019 on.
And MVP. Well, here's the thing. In 2020, he returns in the Royal Rumble match, and he gets thrown out by Brock Lesnar because Brock Lesnar was Brock Lesnar.
After Brock Lesnar danced to his music.
Yes, which was hype as fuck.
That was great.
And then MVP had a match against Rey Mysterio the night after, and then he teased retirement. And personally, I thought if that was the way it was going to go, I was happy for MVP because he had a good career. But now he's been resurgent as the manager of the Hurt Business.
Yeah, and this is really, you want to talk about the best way to transition and still be a part of the business from an active wrestler to semi-active or by mostly retired. What a way to do it. And I'm really proud of WWE for always treating MVP, for the most part, with respect, for the kind of work that he puts in, and having the trust in MVP to do the right, get the job done. Because MVP truly has gotten the job done. He's put in some serious work over the years. Another underrated thing he did in 2009, we kind of jumped over it, was his work teaming with Mark Henry, which I thought was very fun.
Show.
Yeah, I thought that was a great feud that they had. MVP and Mark had a good chemistry together. You know, MVP was always, to me, always talented as a worker. Never really saw him as the world champion, but it didn't need to be, because he was so much better in other ways that actually helped the business as a whole, as well as his legacy. So I hold MVP in extremely high regard, especially now for what he's been able to do with Shelton Benjamin, who feels more important now than ever, Cedric Alexander, who nobody gave a toss about in WWE until it hurt business, and Bobby Lashley, who finally is now the world champion that he was always meant to be, but it took somebody and it took the right guidance to fill in the gaps that Bobby was lacking to make him what he is now. MVP,
because
the real MVP.
We have always agreed that Bobby Lashley, as good as a wrestler as he is, and as good as a physical specimen as he is not a great talker.
He has his moments, but they're just moments.
But you give MVP the microphone, and you just let him talk. And you let him draw you in with his charisma, his word choice, his presence. It's just perfect. Yeah,
MVP, I mean, bar none, MVP is the best thing to happen to WWE in the past 2 years. Or more. Because it just, from what he's been able to do, and to make a group that otherwise probably would have no direction, easily the most entertaining group on the show. Easy.
And very important for something that I think has been noticed by most people, is that they are another representation for black wrestlers and black people that is more positive than negative. Because we can talk about the racial undertones of WWE another time, but the three major black stables of that time is the Nation of Domination, the New Day, and the Hurt Business. And it's so important that we have multifaceted characters and different personalities, because you don't want to draw people into caricatures of just certain stereotypes.
Well, in all fairness to WWE, of those three factions, you had The Rock, who was the Intercontinental Champion, who obviously they rocketed to the moon. You had Kofi Kingston, who it took a long time, but eventually made that leap with the New Day and became world champion. And now with the Hurt Business, you got Bobby Lashley as the world champion. So when they want to, they make it happen. The thing is, it's just, like you said, we could talk about the ratio another time. But they've treated this group the way it should have been treated. And that I really respect. And MVP is a huge part of that.
Exactly. And I'm interested to see what the future holds, because MVP, as the manager of Bobby Lashley, the WWE champion, opens so many possibilities.
Yeah.
And the feuds that MVP and Bobby Lashley could be involved in, like, we obviously are talking about Drew McIntyre, but a Bobby Lashley Randy Orton feud, a Bobby Lashley AJ Styles feud, Bobby Lashley against Brock Lesnar. Imagine MVP and Paul Heyman.
That's kind of what I was thinking. But you know what we're gonna get? We're gonna get Bobby Lashley versus Dolph Ziggler. Of course, because we have to have Dolph Ziggler.
Do you want to make it even worse? Dolph Ziggler with Lana.
Why? What? But you're right. You're right. But why?
Because Lana and Dolph Ziggler have kissed, and Lana's jealous of Bobby Lashley's success.
Could you imagine that they actually inject Lana back into Bobby Lashley? I bet they will. You know, now that we're thinking about, I guarantee you now they're going to do that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Lana's going to come in and
how about the tag team?
We never got divorced.
You know what?
I guess
I've got it. SummerSlam 2021. This is the main event. It is a mixed tag team match. It is the tag team of Dolph Ziggler and Lana versus Bobby Lashley and Nia Jax. Let's make it happen.
I think we need to end the show.
You're right. You know what? We've been having way too much fun here on this birthday celebration. We're getting off the rails here once again, but what a great way. What a great show this has been. Sky, this has been a lot of fun. And as always,
thank you for having me.
That's right. Thank you for being such a great co-host. A nice heartwarming way to end the show to make every fan that we have vomit. Next week, we have got the AEW Revolution pay-per-view review coming up on that Friday after we trudge through it as best we can over at least 2 days because these shows go too long. And then we have another, we'll see if we can find that MVP and Triple H match to put as our match of the week. If not, we'll find something else. And as always, that's Skylar Greenberg. Thank you for being on the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me, and I'll see you all after we watch AEW.
That's right. And as Skylar goes to drink his sorrows away, I am your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty, and we will see you right after this commercial break.